Welcome everyone back to Weekly Weather Updates, and today we're going to have a look at the GFS, the GM, the ECMWF, and the GFO's ensembles. Now we're looking at very interesting weather patterns coming up over the next few weeks. As a result of the sudden stratospheric warming, it's looking like we are going to be ending January on quite a cold note. Now, how cold it's going to get is very much up in the air at the moment. However, there is a chance that it does go bitterly cold. Quite a decent chance it goes bitterly cold, but it's quite high chance now. It's good. It's looking quite firm in the models that it's going to be turning colder, where there would be some snowfall around. So we'll run through the GFS just to show you the general trends before we look at how it compares to GM, the ECMWF, and then the GFS ensembles. So at the moment we've got high pressure to the south, lower pressure to the north, and it's going to be putting a weather front through. So we do temporarily go milder quite widely before going a bit cooler with a bit of a northerly wind. Again, when I mean cooler, it's probably going to be around 4, 5, 6 degrees in the day. We've got those milder sectors around maybe 7 or 8 degrees in the day. As we move through, there's a bit of thinking about the potential snow event from Tuesday into Wednesday. It's quite cold air digs in behind this low pressure. It's not cold enough to turn it bitterly cold everywhere, but it's generally cool air. It doesn't reach the whole country, mostly just northern and eastern areas. But as these weather fronts bump into it, there's potential for snow there. But again, I'm quite sceptical with that, as it's looking very, very marginal, even for higher ground, really. So again, it could be a surprise snow event, but we'll have to look nearer the time for that. Beyond that, though, it generally does go a bit milder, not incredibly mild. If we have a look at the upper airs, it's just around average, really. So the daytime highs maybe 7 or 8 degrees, and lows maybe 2 or 3, maybe with an overnight frost if we're under a ridge of high pressure. But it's really towards the end of the week where we start to go a bit colder. We do try to build heights up towards Scandinavia, and you'd think at this point we're starting to trying to pull an easterly in. We've got quite cold air over the top of the country, so that's going to be quite frosty and cold. So by the end of the week we are turning much colder, but it's not snowy cold such that is which is what we're looking for. There's a chance we start to put a bit of an easterly in. Some models have got a bit of an easterly pulling in there, which again would just enhance the cold, but it wouldn't really provide too much in terms of snowfall. But if we do pull off that easily, it might bring colder air in sooner. And a couple of ensemble members are looking at, and we'll look at that in a minute, but it's quite unlikely at the moment. Just generally around -5 in the upper airs, which is cold enough to give quite a severe frost overnight under high pressure. But it's this amplification out here that we see off the coast of Canada. High pressure edging up towards Greenland, and it's how this what really happens with this evolution. So it's looking quite likely we do develop this amplification. Whether it turns into a block is still quite uncertain, and then what happens with the plunging areas of low pressure coming out from Scandinavia. It's going to have bitterly cold air behind it, and in this run, the high pressure isn't quite far enough to provide the absolutely bitterly cold air. We do go pretty cold, very cold, cold enough for widespread snowfall, apart from probably coastal areas. Even to low-lying areas would be likely to see snowfall within this, and the -10 getting it. Now, if we saw that high pressure move further north and eastwards, we would be starting to pull down these bitterly cold air from Scandinavia, sort of a northeasterly blast. As you see, the isobars are not really facing the UK, so although we are getting the cold air, we're not getting the bitterly cold air drawn in from Scandinavia. It's always going to warm up as it goes over the sea, so we really want as quick as a pattern to cold air as we possibly can. And on this current GFS run, although we do go quite cold for about a week, with quite snowy conditions, as you see areas low pressure run into the cold air, we see a lot of snowfall around that in specific areas, and maybe some widespread snowfall as well, but again, it's too difficult to pin that down. It's not going to be an absolute beast from the east, sort of very, very cold all the time, everywhere. And that's hopefully what we're kind of trying to look for, really. But it is going substantially cold, and I probably, with this sort of pattern, if this pattern came off, there would be widespread snowfall at points, and then probably some more marginal snowfall as these low pressures move up from the south. As again, milder conditions are never too far away, because this block is not pulling bitterly cold air from the northeast. So we do tap into the cold air, but just because it's not blocking out the Atlantic completely, we are starting to potentially bring in milder air there, and that's why I say there, although it does turn cold initially, it will probably stay very cold in the north. Further southwards and for coastal areas, we're never too far away from the milder air, so there's quite a good chance that there could be some very frustrating marginal snow events where Midlands upwards could see several inches of snow, and then south could just see rain. But again, this is very far out, and hopefully it does go a bit colder. As you can see, we do maintain that sort of cold pattern. However, what we get is a west-based NAO, and I've seen some people start to talk about this on Twitter, where it's a consequence of a sudden stratospheric warming, but the blocking is further westwards in the Atlantic, which actually allows low pressure to develop closer to the UK. And although it's a negative NAO, we actually do start to bring milder conditions in, even though colder air is never far away. Because that's what we're really trying to do, is trying to block out any milder air, and we will go very cold with that. As you can see, cold air is never too far away, even when we do start to bring the milder sector in. So it's still very changeable with these conditions. But we are seeing substantial blocking, which is a very good sign. It's even coming into day 10 now, but as you see with the GM and the ECMWF, it really is not deciphered what's actually going to happen. If we look at the GEM now, we'll run through that very similar pattern for the first probably 5 to 6 days, and then we do just have a go at building a Scandi high. However, it never really comes off and gets flattened by low pressure running in from Scandinavia. And as you can see, we do start to put in a bitterly cold northerly wind. Now, unfortunately, I don't know why Weather Central is not updating to 240 hours, but I expect if we continue this, you'd see cold air plunging southwards, and as you can see with the upper airs, although the main area of low pressure doesn't have as much cold air in it, we do have very bitterly cold air plunging in from the north, and you can see the isobars are much more tightly packed there. So it would be providing much colder air, especially further north. Again, it's not the optimum scenario. The low pressure is a bit far too west. The cold air is plunging more out into the Atlantic, unfortunately. You can see there is a very narrow band where the bitterly cold air gets to, unfortunately, because it's coming from the North Sea and via the North Atlantic. Whereas if it was coming more from an easterly direction, it probably would be sustained and be a bit larger, but still be going bitterly cold with this. And this, with a lot of low pressure around there, it would be going very snowy in parts as well. And it's quite a sustained blocking feature to our north, so I expect it would remain fairly cold for a good few days at least. But even if you're not really getting the bitterly cold on -10 degrees and lower, even in the -5, because of the thickness and the direction of the airflow, it would be cold enough for snowfall pretty widely, even to low-lying areas. If we finally have a look at the ECMWF, which hasn't really caught on to the blocking, in fact, and I know the ECMWF is thought of as probably the best performing model. You see, it does try and build that ridge, and it does plunge us into a cold northerly wind, and you do see colder air does flood southwards. However, we're quickly cut off by the Atlantic with the higher pressure toppling. Again, it's time to have another go by day 10 with this ridge moving further northwards again. But it just shows you it's not completely resolved within the models, and there is still a chance that it doesn't come off at all. But at the moment, considering most of the ensemble members are going for the colder conditions, I'm pretty confident saying it's about a 90% chance that we do see colder conditions. Just how cold it gets, it's unknown at the moment, and this ECMWF is hopefully just a blip, really, in the model output. Perhaps this ECMWF run in a couple of days' time, beyond the 240 hours, would provide colder conditions. Unfortunately, we can't see what we forecast, but it may just be that the ECMWF is delaying the blocking. So hopefully the ECMWF has not caught on to something that none of the ensembles or the operational runs and any of the models has caught up on yet. So hopefully the ECMWF is just a blip, and tomorrow it will show that blocking again. Finally, we'll have a look at the GFS ensembles. So you can see that we're sort of a zonal sine wave for the next couple of days. Before the end of the week, we do go quite cold again. But it's quite cold and dry, as you can see there. Precipitation quite low. Precipitation quite high, especially in London, further south with weather fronts for the next couple of days. Beyond that, generally quite dry, but then it does go unsettled again as those areas of low pressure plunge in from the north. And you can see it's around -5 for the foreseeable future from about the 15th, 16th onwards, which is cold enough for snow, but it's not bitterly cold. Now, we do have a lot of ensemble members going cold than that, but then there are still quite a few going mild than that. So it's not written and it's not completely resolved. We don't exactly know what's going to happen. Just generally, this is why I say it's definitely probably going colder, but whether it goes bitterly cold is still uncertain. You can see there are some ensemble members, maybe 3, 4, 5 ensemble members, maybe even a bit more actually, going -10 and below. Beast in the East went to -15, very temporarily, and was probably below -10 for about 3, 4, 5 days. So a couple of ensemble members are going sort of Beast in the East level further on in the model. And that would provide widespread cold conditions with snowfall falling anywhere really, even on the coast. We would be seeing snowfall with that. That would be absolutely bitterly cold. But at the moment, it's looking like it's going colder, but not cold enough where we would be guaranteed snow. And that's what I'm trying to hint at. If we look at the 2 meter temperatures again, you can see with those Beast and East sort of ensemble members, it's negative high really. You see quite a few, or actually maybe 3, 4, 5 going below freezing, not getting above freezing for about 3 or 4 days at the end of January. Others are going much milder, around 6, 7 degrees, which again is around average really, but there's none going very mild as such. The average is around 3 or 4 degree high and around 1 or 2 low. Again, that's just it's just many either side of that. So again, it's going colder. Just how cold at the moment is the uncertainty. It's good to know that the sun's stratospheric warming is coming through the atmosphere, though, because whether the bitterly cold temperatures and cold conditions come off by the end of January, it does mean that the stratosphere is affecting the troposphere, which is kind of what we were worrying about, that it might not propagate through because the troposphere has been disconnected. As you can see, we've had blocking this winter, even though the troposphere was actually quite strong in December. So there is a chance that we remain quite easterly at 10 HBA, where the sun stratospheric warming happened. So we're not seeing as I said in my video 2 days ago, there's a chance we see more sun stratospheric warmings, and more warmings in general, which is going to keep it potentially easterly or westerly, but very weak. So if the stratosphere continues to influence the troposphere, we could be seeing conditions like this, not sustained cold, but we could be seeing quite on and off, very cold conditions for the foreseeable future, the next few weeks, and beyond into February. If that did come off, so it's a very interesting patterns we're seeing here. One thing you really got to keep your eye on, because it will flip. Some point this week we will see a sort of flip where it will decide on one outcome. The models will see, and I suspect it will be in the next couple of days. This week we'll see the models decide what is going to happen. It's very interesting. Upcoming next week, week to 10 days. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon. Hopefully some good news on the snow front.